I have been walking around and always going blank, not knowing what to say. I could either make the decision to walk away or just try. I will confront this big almighty weight and just accept the challenge for what it is. My father. The first time I lost him, I was 10 years old. You might ask, the first time you lost him? Yeah, well, I officially lost him last year, and my father passed away due to homelessness on the streets of South Africa. Story for another time. But the first time I was 10, and I distinctly remember the phone call. I was at my grandmother's house, and the phone rang. It was about 7 in the evening. I distinctly remember the tone of her voice. And I innately knew that it had something to do with my father. And I remember being in the corridor, being attentive to that phone call when she said, "Oh my God, Gary." Until you've experienced that feeling when it hits you in the gut, it's like this instant numbness and shock. Effectively, the onset of trauma just begins. I still remember how that felt. Yeah, let's call this episode 1. The phone call that changed my life. I remember peeping around the corridor whilst my grandmother was still on the phone. Pretty much like a scared puppy, just hoping that what I was hearing just wasn't real. And when she put down the phone, I remember her just breaking down. And to me, that was just indicative of, your life is gonna change now. Things just got real. Because nobody breaks down like that if it's not serious. I remember going to sleep that night. Oh, attempting to sleep. And I mean, if anyone's been through some major heartbreak or a severe life event, you will know what it's like. There's no sleeping, especially at that age. Like, you're literally just seeing life somewhat flashing before your eyes, because you start to mentally calculate and project what is going to be the outcome of this. What's next? Who am I going to become? How is my father? Ultimately was the resounding thought. Yeah, it's amazing how the physical effects of what adrenaline and how the mind plays on the body, how it will prevent you from rest. I must have went to bed around, I think it was like 11 midnight, and being completely awake until the following morning. That morning, I didn't even go to school for obvious reasons. And my grandfather and I and his friend, we proceeded to go to the police station, which was about 150 kilometers away. So it was a bit of a journey. And if you thought that night was horrible with the lack of sleep and the impeding doom, that journey was even worse. Whew. When we arrived into the parking lot of the police station, immediately I recognized my father's car. Even though it was completely demolished, smashed up. The best way I can describe it is, and how I've said this in the past to people, is imagine you've chewed bubblegum and you spat that out. That's exactly how his car looked like. It was beyond recognition, but it was a white Jetta. And it's hard to explain exactly how you're feeling in that moment, because one, you know that your father is alive to a certain extent, just by the accounts of the police officer from the phone call that my grandmother received. But you don't know his condition just on the basis of looking at the car. You automatically assume, how can this man be alive? So now we're parked up in the police station, and my grandfather tells me that I got to stay in the back seat whilst he goes inside to the police station. And that was hard, because now you're alone with your thoughts, in silence, with prime view of your father's car. That wasn't easy to deal with, because all I wanted at that time, I remember, was just to, one, be with my father, but also be with my grandfather. If I didn't mention before, my grandfather passed away 2 months ago. Again, that will be another story. But yeah, it's to be continued. Now, there's one thing to see and another thing to feel, especially when it's right in front of you. So now the officers are coming towards the car with my grandfather. Well, I get out of the car and I'm walking with him towards this wreckage. And I distinctly remember having difficulty to walk because my legs felt as if they were filled with lead. And as I'm approaching the car and then walking around it and feeling it, all I can feel is my father. When I looked at the car, it's like I remember associating it with motocross. So my father and I used to race, and it's something I did growing up. There was one day at the track that my engine seized, and in the small town that I grew up in, there weren't many mechanics who would specialize in that type of engine. So my father had to actually take my bike for repairs on the trailer on the back of that car. So in some ways I started to associate, was this my fault? If the bike never seized, this wouldn't have happened. I'm over those thoughts now, but they were with me for years. All right, that's enough. The hard part in that moment when we're inspecting the damage of the car was looking at my grandfather, observing his facial expressions, and I could see the thoughts racing through his mind. I could only assume that what he was thinking would have been in relation to, wow, I gotta support more members of my family and be a provider on top of all the responsibilities he already had at the time, which I then started to perceive as, again, things are getting real. The journey back home, though, that was memorable. Now we're approaching back home, and I remember us getting into the driveway and my grandmother just standing there with disbelief on her face, the same as my mother. We were informed of my father's whereabouts. He was being transferred to the capital and held in the ICU unit over there, intensive care. And yeah, so I suppose I'll end this part of the story here and continue on the next session. Yeah.